Has anyone ever given you a nickname you didn't like? My friends gave me the nickname whatever because I wasn't willing to try anything new. Unless, of course, it happened to do with my main passion, which was sharks. If you wanted to go to the aquarium and learn how they were trying to save sharks, I was all in. Whatever was the last thing I would say then. I was so obsessed with sharks, I would look up in the sky and imagine them swimming up there, in the clouds. And then I've had a reality check. You see, I'm afraid of the water and can't swim. So for now, I can only be a Landshark, an awesome nickname I picked for myself. While I learn to get over my fear of the water, I will be a champion for sharks everywhere. They are cool and mysterious and powerful, just like I want to be. I have 3 best friends, all 12 years old, like me. They have nicknames too. I'll start with Cincy and Leo, who are twins.
Cincy wears round, hot pink eyeglasses that make her curious eyes seem even bigger than they are. Nothing gets by her keen senses, hence her name. She moves slowly and thoughtfully, noticing everything. Leo is like a walking brain and the best artist I know. We nicknamed him Leo because he's always quoting Leonardo da Vinci and making smart-sounding pronouncements like, "To draw something is to know it." Cincy and Leo spend every moment they can outside, exploring the world. When Cincy notices something new, like a beautiful bird, Leo pulls out his crayons and a blank note card from his pocket, then draws a picture. Later, back at home, he does research. To sum them up, Cincy notices, Leo knows.
And then there's Freda. No need to explain how she got her nickname. While all I really care about is sharks, Freda cares way too much about everything. She makes herself sick with worry about the woes of the world and is like a walking nerve ending. Doesn't help that she listens to the radio 24/7 just in case there's bad news. But Freda's no wimp. She's a woman of action. Freda always has a plan, which she'll discuss in great detail with her little crescent Chinese dog named Annabelle. They're a strange pair. The 4 of us friends live with our families in an apartment complex on the riverside of our city. At 12 years old, we've never known a time that our street didn't flood at a high tide, especially when it rained. My aunt says the downpours we're having these days are more like water bombs. When that happens, it's like we're surrounded by a moat. The weird thing is, our street has standing water in it, even when it doesn't rain. One Saturday, last September, we 4 are hanging out in the side yard.
Cincy and Leo decided that it was time to find out where all the water was coming from. Landshark, Freda, want to join us? The twins asked in unison.
I'll pass, I said, not remotely interested, since this quest didn't seem to have anything to do with sharks. At least, not that I knew of.
"No, thank you," exclaimed Freda. "Annabelle might drink the nasty water in the puddles, and her feet would get all wet." So, Cincy and Leo took off across the street, heading for the mud puddle that seemed like it was always there.
I watched them climb up on the low fence at the street corner and returned my full attention to my shark video game.
"Let's think about all the clues we have so far that might explain our flooding situation," said Cincy with authority. "I'm ready," said Leo, fanning out his deck of note cards. Cincy selected several of Leo's drawings and studied them. Then she announced, "Well, for sure, when all these conditions are present, our flooding situation is definitely bad." "That's right," declared Leo confidently. "A high tide, full or new moon, and a strong wind coming on shore are definitely causative flooding factors." But Cincy was frowning. Leo knew this look. "What's wrong, Cincy?" "There's still something missing, Leo. Something important we're not noticing about why our place floods so very badly." Cincy stared at the mud puddle and then suddenly jumped down from the fence, waded into the middle of the water, and pulled on a tall strand of grass at her feet. "Leo, draw this puddle," she demanded, then continued. "This tall grass is growing straight up through the asphalt." Why have we never noticed this before? Leo, now standing at the edge of the puddle, busily added grass to his drawings. Cincy stood up and looked all around her, her eyes fixed on something across the street. Leo followed her gaze. Quickly, looking both ways, Cincy darted across the street, snapped a photo with her phone, and sprinted back. She exclaimed, "Oh my gosh, Leo, look at this picture. The grass in this puddle is exactly like the marsh across the street." "You're right," exclaimed Leo. "That could only mean the salt water from the creek is pushing up through the street and making a new little marsh over here," cried Cincy. "Cincy!" Leo exclaimed excitedly. "I think our neighborhood used to be a creek. We have to tell Landshark. There would have been baby sharks swimming right where the road is now." And at exactly the same time, they started singing the baby shark song. Baby shark do 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 do, baby shark do 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 do, baby shark do 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 do, baby shark.
Of course, I didn't hear any of that from where I still sat with Freda and her ridiculous dog.
Freda, per usual, was tuned out with her headphones on, listening for bad news. Suddenly, and completely without warning, Freda screamed, "I'm scared!"
"Dang, Freda," I shouted. "You gotta stop doing that."
"What's happening over there?" shouted Cincy and Leo, running back to join us. "There's a hurricane coming," Freda squeaked, scooping up Annabelle.
"Whatever," I said irritably. "That means we'll have a few days off school."
"No, Landshark," chirped Cincy in a shrill voice. "That means we have to start paying attention to the weather forecast." "Activate emergency plan," cried Freda, squeezing Annabelle even tighter. "Good idea, Freda," said Leo. "The storm must be moving fast and getting bigger. It was just a small tropical depression yesterday, though I have to say it was well organized."
"Whatever," I say again. "We're 12 years old and we haven't had a bad hurricane yet. Every year it's the same old drill. I for one look forward to the extra holiday." This is the part of the story where you would hear scary music, as I beg you to please repeat after me. Never ever say whatever, especially in a hurricane.
Now, back to the story. Leo, who never loses his cool, spoke next. "The NHC will show the cone of uncertainty," he declared matter-of-factly.
"The cone of what? NH who?"
By way of an explanation, Leo pulled out his note cards. He flipped through them and held out the exact one he was looking for. "Here's a drawing of a cone of uncertainty," Leo began. "It shows the predicted path of the storm, but even the National Hurricane Center experts don't know exactly where the hurricane's going to make landfall."
I took the card and examined it. "But we're not even inside that cone at all," I said.
"Oh, Landshark!" cried Freda. Leo continued patiently. "Landshark, this cone shows the worst possible landfall of all. One that hits to the south and makes the storm surge even worse. The wave could be as high as our building." Brr, 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 went Leo's phone. "It's a FEMA hazard alert," he said. "The hurricane's already a Category 3.
"But isn't Category 5 the worst?" Full confession, at that time, I had no idea what these category numbers really meant.
"Me and my family are out of here," exclaimed Freda, scooping up Annabelle and taking off. "Be safe," exclaimed Leo. "Cincy, time for you and me to go get Grammy and go too. A Category 3 is a major hurricane. We could lose power for days, get flooded out, even drown." Cincy started to cry, and Leo put his arms around his sister.
So, I did know what was happening in this case. Leo and Cincy's parents were both first responders and had to stay put in any kind of emergency. They had no family living anywhere nearby. If a hurricane evacuation order was given, their parents would grab their emergency kit they always had packed and take Cincy, Leo, and their great-grandmother to the hurricane evacuation bus stop down the street. They would then be taken to whatever shelter was open at the time, and that could mean as far as 50 miles. My own situation was a bit more complicated. You see, my mom was in a long-term care hospital, and my older sister worked 12-hour shifts in the business across town. She and I had done the evacuation thing one time, but we totally messed up. We had definitely not made a family plan. We definitely not had an emergency kit pack. So when the hurricane warning was made, which meant we only had 36 hours before things could get really bad, my sister and I just grabbed what we could and hit the road in hopes we could find an inexpensive place where we could stay. However, we waited so long we got trapped in a traffic jam with a gazillion people. About 30 miles out, we ran out of gas. Then our cell phones died. We stayed on the side of the road until the next morning when we finally got towed to a gas station where we stayed for a whole day until the lanes were reversed and we could go back home. It was terrible. You'd think we have learned our lesson and been more prepared for the next storm, but that's not how the story goes at all. 2 hours later, my friends had all left the neighborhood. It was already dark outside, and I knew my sister wouldn't be home for 3 more hours. I tried calling her several times, but the call wouldn't go through. Finally, she sent me a text to say she was stuck on the other side of the city. Sometime during the day, officials had reversed the lanes so only that emergency vehicles were being allowed to come back into the city. I suddenly realized I was now completely on my own. The winds were picking up, and it was starting to rain. What happened next was like being in a slow-motion horror movie. Here's how it went. I knew I had to eat, so I made my favorite meal, a jelly sandwich. The rain slammed so hard against the windows that I was sure they would break. The next minute, the power went out. Oh no, where had I put my phone? In the pitch black dark, I couldn't find a regular flashlight. I had one thought. This Landshark couldn't swim. I had to get out of there. In a panic, I crawled toward the door of the apartment, turned the handle, and to my horror, was instantly flung backwards and upside down by a wall of waist-deep water that burst through the doorway. Somehow, I didn't know how, I didn't drown right then. I knew I had to get to the stairs in the hall because that water was rising fast. I swear I felt fish bumping up against me. By the time I managed to get to the stairwell and grab the railing, the water was up to my neck. The sound of window glass shattering echoed in the stairwell. Terrified, I scrambled up toward the top floor landing, grateful for the dim emergency light that had come on. The howling wind outside sounded like what I imagined a horde of zombies would make if they all screamed at once. Nearing the top floor landing, I could hear that someone else was up there too, but I didn't see them. Suddenly, that one weak light gave out. In the pitch black dark, once again, I shouted, "Who's there?"
"Landshark!"
cried 5-year-old Rufus, whose voice I knew immediately. He threw his arms around my legs, nearly knocking me over. I picked him up and said, "Hi yourself, Rufus." "Don't worry, we'll be fine," I tried to assure him. "Who's here with you?"
"My mom and baby sister,"
Rufus whispered.
"Over here, behind the wall,"
he said, crawling back to his family. Then, something kicked in inside me. I didn't even recognize myself. "We'll be fine," I said again, but I was quite certain that we all could die at any moment. None of us had a flashlight. In quiet terror, we listened to the howling wind. The rooftop door rattled on its old hinges. It was the longest night in the history of the universe. We must have fallen asleep because I awoke abruptly to morning light, peeking through the top of the door to the roof. I stood up and checked the door. It wasn't locked. Pushing the door open, I stepped on the roof and beheld a sight I could not believe was real. It was as if our whole neighborhood has been swallowed by the river. I gulped and turned around to meet 3 frightened faces, glowing like ghosts in the morning light. Suddenly, I knew exactly what I had to do. I quietly asked Miss Green if I could borrow baby Marie's red blanket. She nodded and carefully uncovered her tiny daughter. I returned to the roof and started waving the blanket in the air as hard as I could. After an hour of this, I became exhausted and full of despair. Just when I thought my arms would collapse, off in the distance came the most beautiful sound in the entire world, that of a loud, magnificent helicopter, now hovering above our building like a giant insect. On the side of the copter was stamped United States Coast Guard. 30 minutes later, after the others had already been saved, I too was secured in a giant red basket by Mr. Shannon, a Coast Guard rescue specialist. He told me to be brave. There are no words to describe the mix of joy and terror I felt as I was lifted off the roof and toward the hovering helicopter above. So now what? Well, to start, my friends now call me Leader Landshark.
If you're a leader, you know what to notice, like Cincy, what to know, like Leo, what to do, like Freda, especially when faced with a hazard like a hurricane. And most of all, if you're a leader,
you learn from and own your own mistakes. I've saved the best news for last. I'm learning to swim, just like a real shark. I can swim, do 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 do. I can swim, do 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 do. I can swim, do 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 do. How cool is that?
Before we go, we invite you to join the growing Kids Teaching Flood Resilience movement, a NOAA weather-ready nation ambassador program of excellence, being led by youth like you and these students at Simmons Pinckney Middle School in Charleston, South Carolina. Their amazing video will inspire you to step up, get ready, respond, so you can reduce your risk of harm from an extreme weather event. Next, get hurricane smart with this team from Morningside Middle School in North Charleston, South Carolina.
Finally, please repeat after me one more time.
Never ever say whatever, except